What's up everyone, Steven here with Neural DSP, and today is part 3 of the Artist Tones video breaking down the electric guitar tones used in my rendition of Opeth's Ghost of Perdition. Let's start with the equipment that Michael Ackerfeld uses. As I mentioned in the previous episode, Opeth was kind enough to list the equipment they used in recording Ghost Reveries. So we can see from the list that he used some PRS guitars, a Fender Strat, and a Gibson SG to record guitars. They're a little more vague on the amps, citing various Laney amps, Mesa Boogie rectifiers, and a Vox hybrid amp, but this at least gives us a great starting point. Now I tried a bunch of different combinations of guitars and amplifiers, but to my ear, the closest I got was using this Fender Jazzmaster and the Omega Ampworks Granifier. However, I did include the presets I made with the Archetype Nolly in the download link as well, just in case you don't have the Granifier yet. But ultimately, the Granifier got me closest to the mark because, to my ears, the impulse responses had the closest profile to the original track. Let's go ahead and start with the intro guitars. When listening back to the original track around the 57th time or so, I thought I heard something really interesting in the intro. It almost sounded like there was a delay on the guitars playing the second strum of each chord. That's probably not how it was done in the studio, and it isn't how they play it live, but I figured it might be cool to make that into an effect anyway. So I started with the Omega Ampworks Granifier, used a little EQ and saturation, shaped the guitar, and then ran through the Archetype Pliny's effects section. I even went so far as to put an EQ on the DI before the Granifier to darken the signal just slightly. Next up is the rhythm guitars. I'll show them to you without my bus processing on and go through the preset and how I came to the settings as they are. Then I'll turn on my bus chain to illustrate the moves I made to get them to fit in the mix. Based on the tones I heard in the original and thinking of the equipment that was used, I knew I had to make 3 moves first. This tone can't be super saturated. Opeth is a metal band, but their tone has always struck me as a more high-gain rock tone, actually. Warm, crunchy, but not overly saturated. So I first bypassed the Plume's overdrive and dialed back the gain to about 10 o'clock. That takes care of the saturation. And then I switched the power tubes to the EL34 in order to maintain that warmth and not have as much breakup on the top end as the 6L6 and the KT66 introduce. Before making moves on the tone stack, depth, and presence knobs though, I move over to the impulse response. I found the VM1265 impulse responses were nice and warm and had a similar profile to the guitars I was hearing in the original. I settled on the 184 and the 7B, both from the VM1265 for my rhythm tones. Lastly, there's a slight dip at 4 and 8K on the EQ just to get a little bit less presence. For the grit tone, I changed out the impulse response to the Ribbon 121 VM. I went with the 121 because it has a little bit more low-end push and felt more appropriate for the slightly cleaner tone. I also used the Plume's overdrive pedal to get a tiny bit of saturation before it hit the amp. To offset the gain on the amp, however, I lowered the output from the pedal and flipped the gain switch from high to low. The heavier tone is a slight change from the grit tone. I flipped the gain switch back to high and bumped the gain up slightly. I then turned on the dynamic 57 VM so I could get a little bit more cut in this section. Last but certainly not least, we have the lead guitars provided by my good friend Scott Moda. I chose the Archetype Pliny's third head and a similar impulse response setup as some of the rhythm guitars with a ribbon 121 and a condenser 184. I ended up having to EQ this one a bit more aggressively than the others merely because there's a bit of noise inherent in his recording space. It's noise that you don't really hear so much in the mix, but when soloed it sounds like this. Which actually brings up a point. I'm actually thinking of building a separate video for ways you can deal with noisy DIs in a mix. Go ahead and comment down below, let me know if this is something that you guys would be interested in seeing. Thank you so much for checking out this video. Next episode, I'll show you how you can use Neural DSP products to process acoustic instruments and demonstrate a few different microphones used in this cover. Maybe even show how to process a little cello? Comment down below if that's something you want to see. Presets for the guitars are in a link in the description. And while you're there, subscribe, like, share, and hit that bell icon to be notified whenever we drop new content on this channel. And as always, I'll see you in the next video.